Welcome to Both. Both is Good, a podcast where DMs, GMs, lore keepers, and anyone who runs tabletop games talk to each other about how they run their games. I'm Adam, and I've been running games mostly by the book.
And I'm Sierra, and I hate math.
And this is a nice opportunity for the two of us to pick each other's brains and about the various ways we run our D&D 5e games, and also to just hang out for a little bit.
Yeah, we're hanging out.
Hang out a little bit, but not usually outside of... We're both busy people, is what I'm trying to say.
Busy, yeah. Sometimes I think you're busier than I am, which is mind-boggling to me.
I don't feel like I am, but then every time something comes up, someone's like, hey, do you want to do this? I'm like, well, I have these things going on. Like, it happened today, like this Saturday. Like, someone's like, hey, we're doing something. And I'm like, well, I've already agreed like a month ago to play in a D&D game and to go to the movies this day. So I have like this 3-hour window in my Saturday.
Oh, yeah.
And if it doesn't like line up with that,
I can't
that. Really. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what's up?
Yeah. Not much. I mean, weekend D&D's been pretty slow for me. My Friday games the last couple of weeks have both been canceled because people are people and humans have other obligations that come up.
Other humans.
Other humans. Especially if those humans have tiny humans of their own.
Oh,
that tends to take up time. And, and I have to respect that, and I'm trying not to get too in my head about that. And then Sunday game's been going pretty good. We played online for 1 week. We met in person. We progressed story.
Nice.
Yeah. We had one combat. I'm struggling to remember what it was. It's been a really bad memory week for me.
Oh, dang.
Yeah, it's been very much like, time is moving at a snail's pace, but also what happened? I don't know. Not a whole lot, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had an important fight there. I played the Digimon TTRPG for a little bit, and that was really cool. We got to
Digimon digital.
My Digimon finally digivolved for the first time.
Whoa!
That was exciting.
Nice.
Then almost immediately got murked as soon as he digivolved. So, that's cool. Things happen. That's fine. And it's pretty much been my week in D&D. How about you, Mystic? Oh, and then the podcast, of course.
Well,
the podcast happened.
The podcast happened.
It was good.
The session from hell.
It was so good. We might just have to do that session again.
It was so good. We might have to do it again. Yeah. I mean, that is from since the last time we recorded, that's the farthest back session that I have been in. And for listeners, my computer just kept crashing. So I've known that I've needed a new computer just for a while, but it's expensive, and we're doing this for fun. We have never turned a profit at Autumn Moon Studios. So subscribe to the Patreon. Finally ordered that. It'll be here tomorrow, which I'm excited about. So, but yeah, we lost so much of my content. I've been chatting with the support for the program that we use that records to try to figure out if any of it can be found, and they were like, yeah, we can try to manually do that on the back end, but it takes a really long time, so we'll email you when it's done. And in my mind I was like, okay, a really long time in this day and age digitally is like a few hours. So I've just been refreshing the page all day. Like, I had a kind of a slow work day, so I've just been working on stuff for the studio and constantly refreshing the page to see if my audio is there. It's not there yet still.
Right. A really long time is a very non-specific unit of time to give someone. Does that mean 3 hours? Does that mean a month? How much Like, in what context are we looking at this very long time?
I have no idea. So if yeah, probably chat them tomorrow if it's still not there. But the Wednesday game met. So we played yesterday, and oh my gosh, Adam, I felt so bad. It was our first session after a month off.
Yeah.
And I had done all this prep because at the end of the session before, they had talked about going back to Florencia from where they were. They didn't. They went to a whole brand new town that I haven't thought about in 2 years. And I was making everything up. They were like, I'm going to go to the bounty board. And I'm like, you get some bounties. And they were like, that's it? And I was like, yeah, I don't have anything prepped.
Oh, no.
I made up some names. Someone's name is now Top Hat because that's the first thing that came to mind. You know, like...
Great. Everyone's going to love Top Hat. Top Hat has to be adopted now.
Yeah, so, and I felt really bad because I was like, this is a tip for just DMs in general. I like to send out anonymous surveys every once in a while to all my players. Adam got one, people of the podcast and people of the Wednesday game. And I've just been like trying to take some of that feedback and instill more lore into the games. And like, I felt bad because it was just like complete fumble. I couldn't bring anything to the table. So I stayed up late and like made all these bounties and wrote a letter that one of the players found a few sessions ago that I like owed them in writing instead of me just like saying it in session, you know, like all of that like stuff, which was great. And now I'm here. And that was my week in D&D. It was a lot. I'm sorry. I just rambled.
No, that's what this is for, is to ramble. I'm lucky enough to have not run into that situation yet. Like, I know it exists. And I try to think that I purposely prep in a way that like prevents that from happening. But at any point, your players could just decide.
Yeah.
Like something could just click in their mind and they'll like grab on to something you said like it was a hint, even though it wasn't. They'd be like, I know what we should do. Pirate adventure. Let's go. To the open seas.
It's going to happen. No. I know it's going to happen. Yeah.
So today, we're going to talk about critical hits and critical misses.
Nat 20s and Nat 1s.
Nat 20s and Nat 1s. It's a topic that garners a lot of different rulings. I think every table I've been at has played it different.
That's so interesting. I have only ever played, and this is impressive, I've only ever played at one table that had like an actual written house rule about critical failure specifically. And that's Daniel's game, right? And we can talk about his system as we dive into it. But other than that, it's just been loosey-goosey.
Yeah. I mean, where to begin?
Where to begin? Oh man, you're right. This topic, it's been talked about by so many folks. Yeah. And should we
begin with the book?
Yes. Sure. That's what I was just gonna say.
So in 5th edition, in the rolling of a 1 or 20, it states, sometimes fate blesses or curses a combatant, causing the novice to hit and the veteran to miss. If the D20 roll for an attack is a 20, the attack hits regardless of any modifiers or the target's AC. In addition, the attack is a critical hit, as explained later in this chapter. And if the D20 roll for an attack is a 1, the attack misses, regardless of any modifier and the target's AC. And that is the extent of rules for critical hits and misses in 5th edition. It tells you what to do with a critical hit later on, where it says, when you score a critical hit, you get to roll extra dice for the attack's damage against the target. Roll all of the attack's damage dice twice and add them together. Then add any irrelevant modifiers as normal. To speed up play, you can roll all the damage dice at once. For example, if you score a critical hit with a dagger, you roll 2d4 for the damage rather than 1d4, and then add your relevant ability modifier. If the attack involves other damage dice, such as from the rogue sneak attack feature, you roll those dice twice as well.
Yeah.
And this is a deviation from every other iteration of Dungeons and Dragons.
They don't let you roll sneak attack?
You do not get to add sneak attack or any other bonus dice to the damage rolls on a critical hit in each system before this one. 5th edition was the first to allow that.
What other changes are there? Are there any?
Well, so there are, kind of. There definitely are. So, like, in the older versions, specifically in 3.5, when you scored a critical hit, it didn't mean you got to crit. Rolling a natural 20 just meant that you automatically hit, and then you had to roll the dice again, and using your same attack modifier. And if you still hit, then it was a critical hit. And this was not affected by properties that allowed you to extend your crit range, because in 3.5, you could have keen weapons, which made you crit on numbers that weren't 20, or you had abilities that let you crit earlier. And those crits are not automatic hits. You still have to hit the target's AC in order for it to potentially crit. The only number you could roll to automatically hit is a 20, no matter what your crit range is.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Things that I didn't know until today when I read through the rules for the first time in 3.5. Because at the tables I would play at, they were like, oh, it means it's a crit and crits auto hit. So if your crit range is large, you're automatically hitting, even if the second attack doesn't make it a crit. Which was incorrect. And then if you go all the way back to AD&D 2nd edition, critical hit was an optional rule in the DMG. Ooh. And not part of the core rule set.
Wow.
It was actually in a section titled kind of, I don't know. It's not the best name for where this rule would be. It's in a section called Impossible to Hit Numbers.
Oh, okay.
Where it states that, sometimes even on a 20, your attack's not going to beat the target number you have to hit. But combat's kind of chaotic, so if you roll a 20, even if you shouldn't hit, you're going to hit. And if you roll a 1 and you would still hit with a 1, you're not going to hit with a 1. Because combat is chaos, and sometimes you hit when you shouldn't and you miss when you should.
Yeah.
But to deal extra damage was not calculated there, and some of the description in the DMG for why is because if your players can do it, the monsters should be able to do it. If the monsters do it, your players are going to die.
Whoa.
Because that's just kind of how 2nd edition worked, to my knowledge. I'm not like an aficionado on 2E, but by what I understand, that's how it worked.
That's so interesting. So it seems to me that throughout the ages, players have gained more and more of an ability to just be gods.
Yep.
And to succeed.
Yes. From humble beginnings, where it was the exact opposite.
Yeah. Man.
But just why you kind of see that culture happening within 5e of people who kind of like that. Because like 2e is definitely like, you have to play with what you roll, and it's going to be hard kind of war game mindset. Where each edition after that added more of the communal storytelling elements to it and made it a little less like you're going to die all the time for the benefit of the story.
Yeah.
Which is like really interesting. And the other interesting part in all of these books is it never has rules for a critical fumble. A Nat 1 is always just a miss. And there are no other rules on top of it.
I knew that's how it was for 5e, but I didn't realize that's how it is for every edition.
For every edition.
Okay, before we dive into that hot mess of a thing, I think I personally would like to talk about successes first, because I know that the failures, I'm going to get on a soapbox, and I'm not quite ready for that.
Sure thing. We'll stay with crit hits.
Okay. So for crits, for 5e, it's now way easier. You as a DM, Adam, do you have any like outlying mechanics that you bring to Nat 20s at your table when they're rolled?
I used to. So I used to play with these cool supplemental decks that exist, which I'm going to hold up for Mystic, but the listeners won't be able to see. It's a deck of cards called the Critical Hit for GMs deck. So there wouldn't be anything extra for my players. When they crit, they got to roll double damage and add it to their modifier. But when my monsters would crit, I would initially draw one of these cards, and then based on what type of attack it would have an additional effect instead of dealing double damage. So like this one, if it was a spell and it was a crit, the spell was a life drinker. And if the attack dealt acid, poison, or necrotic damage, the player's constitution would be reduced by 2 until they finished a long rest.
Whoa.
Instead of them suffering a critical hit.
What made you move away from that?
It just kind of got difficult to track. It got difficult for me to like keep up with the crits that were happening and the damage that was going out. And eventually I just found it like simpler to just be like, it's a penalty enough that you're getting crit and taking more damage. I don't need to draw this card and make it even worse, because that's kind of not the campaign we're setting out to play. We're not playing the dungeon delving, high mortality, brutal combat game style. We're more playing the by the books. Let's do it how it's meant to be done, or like how it's written out, and see where it takes us.
Yeah.
What about you? How do you play critical hits?
Well, it's just cool.
Yeah.
I like to always incorporate roleplay into combat. That's like a huge thing for me. But I think I even more so with critical hits will be like, wow, that's really fucking awesome. You did that. What does this look like? Describe it to me, and then also potentially describe something that I know might be beneficial for the character from the monster side, or the terrain, or the location, or maybe, they get help, whatever that may be. But it's almost, it is 100% always narratively driven. But yeah, I've never used any extra tables or cards, or I also don't buff like monsters and things in that way. I actually never even really thought of that until you just mentioned it. Because, extra damage is the way that I approach calculating a safe combat encounter. So if I add other things in, yeah, that's intimidating to me. Yeah. Like that might be really hard to track.
Yeah, it could very quickly make something that's really balanced become very unbalanced.
Yeah.
Just a couple bad dice rolls.
Yeah. I mean, critical successes are just cool. It's a fun time. In terms of like, I find it, this is a segue, right? This is a branching of the failures and the successes.
Okay.
I'm sure you have heard this soapbox / statement, and also listeners potentially have heard this from other DMs on the internet, but I think it's a valid thing that we should bring up. Critical failures and critical successes are 100% partial to martial classes, because spellcasters use a lot more saving throw mechanics than they do attack mechanics most of the time, right? Like a blade singer would be an exception maybe, or like there are certainly exceptions to that rule, but 100% of the time your barbarian is going to be swinging something or throwing something or punching something, like
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the bard maybe cast an attack-based spell, but then Distant Whispers comes in, you know, like.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been, for my time as a lore keeper, as a GM, noodling over how you balance that. And I don't think it's a balance from the critical success side. It's a balance from the critical failure side. Because if you get, it's a 1 in 20 chance you're going to roll a 20 or a 1, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that chance gets higher and higher the higher level you get. But you're supposed to become like cooler and cooler and like more and more trained. So it's like this weird thing for me that I wrestle with personally around critical failures. Does this make any sense?
I think so. Like, in what direction for critical failures? Like, do you, like, in what way? I guess just in what way?
I'll keep going.
Sure.
So
yeah.
I would say, like, I'm willing to somewhat ignore a nat 1 from a fighter on their second attack at level 7, you know, because that wizard isn't going to be able to cast 2 attack spells in 1 turn. So the probability that the fighter is going to roll a 1 more throughout the length of the campaign, even though they're supposed to be more skilled as they gain multiple attacks in combat, is uncool to me.
Okay.
Does that make more sense?
I think so. So you're saying that critical failure is more of a mechanic that's detrimental to marshals than it is to casters.
Yes.
But in the same way, critical hits are more beneficial to marshals than they are to casters.
For sure. Yep.
Which I'd say is probably fair. You know,
yeah.
As you put, there's definitely exceptions where there are spells that require attack rolls. They're kind of few and far between, but you know, you've always got your Scorching Ray, your Eldritch Blast, your Guiding
Fireball.
Bolts. Fireball's not one. You don't
really?
hit with a fireball. No,
or Firebolt.
Just
Sorry.
Firebolt. Yes. Correct. They both sound similar, and my hearing is not great.
yeah.
I think that's like I haven't thought of it that way in analyzing the game. And I think that's kind of a draw on the critical hit side to being a marshal, where it's something I didn't consider that marshals get more of than casters. Because casters, you know, obviously, once you get to high levels and get spells like Banish, a caster could just end a combat in a spell. Where a martial class gets the flip side of getting like really cool. Like they could have that turn where they roll like 2 crits in a row and deal like 1 billion damage and then action surge or whatever. And that's super cool. And I hadn't thought of it like that. But
so
what
you
do
think
mean
that's
by,
cool?
Yeah. What
and
do
you think it's
balanced
inherently?
That one? Balanced inherently?
Yeah.
No, the classes aren't supposed to be balanced against each other in 5th edition.
Yeah. What I mean by ignoring a nat 1, so this is like when you come at the nat 1s from a story perspective, again, having never used a table, having never modified the rules, only like a nat 1 doesn't hit. That's how I take a nat 1. I have at higher levels intentionally been like, and this is loosely ignoring. I did this with Godfrey a little bit when you dropped your dagger and it went in your foot. But like if it's your second attack and you roll like a nat 1 your last turn and you roll another one on this turn and something more extreme happened on the last turn, I'm more apt to just be like, okay, well, you just drop it, or like something, rather than like your bowstring breaks or your fireball hits your teammate, or like you stab yourself in the arm. Like I'm more apt to make it something less than what I feel a lot of people take Nat 1s to be. And that's what I mean by like ignoring. It's definitely a quotational ignoring.
So by ignoring, you're more meaning going by the actual rules where it just misses and doesn't have a negative consequence.
Yes. Yeah, I guess so.
I've been looking at you this whole time like, what do you mean, Mystic? I rolled a Nat 1 and you had me roll max damage against myself for throwing my dagger in my foot. Like, what do you mean you're ignoring these Nat 1s from Marshals?
Well, if you would have ignored it, if you would have rolled another Nat 1 your next turn,
then you would have ignored it.
Then I would have been like, oh, Adam's having a bad day. I don't want Godfrey to die because he's being negligent.
Yeah, no. Instead, on my next turn, I tried to drink a potion and my soul came out of my body.
You knew that was going to happen, though.
I knew that was going to happen. But still.
I'm sorry. I took so long to explain that, and I did a horrible job.
No, you did fine. That's why we're talking on this show, so we could get the explanation out and just talk to each other.
Yeah.
About the chaos that is 5th edition D&D and the gray area of rules, right?
Yeah.
And honestly, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, in 3.5, what I didn't realize was a house rule that we were playing with is marshals and non-marshals in 3.5 got extra attacks, right? Like as you got up in levels, you could attack extra times. And it was ruled there that if on any of your attacks you rolled a 1, you forfeited the rest of your attacks that turn and your turn ended.
I have played like that.
And I wonder how it's really like there's a cool cultural study that could be done on D&D about how this works and how like the word of mouth rules spread to the community as a whole. Because like I've known multiple tables that played like that, and that's not stated anywhere in the rules, which is like might even go all the way back to, that first AD&D where like the first book's like, hey, if you're new to the game, don't read this book. Go play with a table that knows how to play. And then after you've played like a full adventure, then maybe come back to the book if you want to reference something, but never read this book like a nerd.
Yep.
Don't be like Adam in the podcast and just read the book. That's dumb. There's a lot of rules in here. It's really boring. Just play the game. Have fun with your friends.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to see, like, it'd be cool to like pinpoint where some of these like rules began with someone just misunderstanding the rules the first time and then teaching, everyone, and then having those people go out and teach everyone else. Just, it's fascinating. Sorry. That was definitely a tangent, but it definitely comes from those crit fails, like being terrible. So it's so interesting. And then like the Daniel's Games failures where you roll a miss and then you roll again to like confirm the miss is definitely also a house rule that came in response to the confirming crit rule in 3.5. Because everyone was just like, well, if you confirm a crit in 3.5, you have to confirm a fail too, right? And then something really bad happens. But just never in the rules.
Yeah.
It's all bonkers.
It's all subjective.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've also played at the table where it's like, we're hardcore. And every time you roll in that 1, something really bad happens. Every time you hit someone else, every time you take damage personally, every time you like... And it's just like, fuck, dude, because it's like, what, 5% of the time, like, gonna be mortally wounding myself or someone else. Like,
yeah. It and then doesn't lean into the fantasy of who your character is at all.
Exactly. And to that point, as you grow, I've said this already, but I'm going to say it again and I'm going to like flush this idea out. As you grow in levels, you are supposed to, and I believe this is in the DMG, you're the master there, you can tell me whether or not, but I believe in like the general explanation of the game, there is something about how you start at level 1 and then at level 20 you're essentially a god. Like, you grow in expertise, you grow in your abilities, and eventually you become these epic heroes.
Yeah. It's in the, like, the tiers of play.
Yeah. But in the like, how can I be rewarded and narratively be this epic thing, and then in this battle I'm like dropping my sword or hitting someone else on accident, or like, you know, it doesn't really make a lot of sense narratively. But the statistics on the dice don't change throughout the levels. It actually gets harder for martial classes because you get more attacks. Yeah.
I mean, statistically, the number remains the same every roll of the dice. It's still a 1 in 20. But I agree. That's why, like, at least in my table, I'm really glad to go by the book on this one, where, like, Nat 1s, you're not dropping things, you're not breaking things, you're just missing. And, like, that's really easy to narratively describe in a situation, because sometimes things just get in the way, or the thing you're fighting is faster than you and you just miss. And, like, that's realistic, you know?
Oh, yeah.
It's like, not every hit's gonna hit. You know, not every swing is gonna be, you know, critical and make them bleed out. And if it did, that would, you know, take a little bit of the risk out of it, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
I've realized now that "you know" is my filler word. And I'm going to hyperfixate on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, in that regards, that's why, like, I never add an additional detriment to a critical failure, because a critical failure is in and of itself a punishment in the game. And, you know, if you look at it from, like, a behavioral psychology perspective, if you're already receiving a punishment, to put another punishment on top of that punishment creates, like, a really unfun play pattern. It makes these critical hits something that's like, it's already bad. Why are you making it worse? Like, it's doubled down on the fact that you're not in control of rolling a nat 1. So it's being punished for a situation that's outside of your control in the first place. I will 100% stand by the ruling of not adding detriments to nat 1s.
Yeah. How does that work for you mechanically for spellcasters? Like, if a spellcaster is going to loose a firebolt, it exists in the world regardless. Like, even if they roll a nat 1 and they just miss, it still exists. Like, it doesn't just not, it has to go somewhere, you know?
Yeah. It either goes its distance and slowly fizzles out because it has a maximum range, right? And kind of like a firework or an ember, as it goes further and further, it burns smaller and smaller until it just is nothing. Or, like, specifically firebolt in its wording is not able to catch things on fire because it's just like a burning thing of ember. So if it misses, it's just like hitting a wall and scattering, maybe leaving like a singe mark for flavor, or it's like, you know, searing the edges of some foliage, but then quickly snuffing out into smoke, something like that. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and be like, you know, I'm not gonna make my marshals have anything bad happen if they miss, but those casters, ooh, bad things.
Just curious.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it to come across as anything else, but yeah. Do you have a different way of dealing with casters as opposed to marshals in the way they miss?
Yeah, I do. In that scenario, yeah, it would be hard for me to just be like, okay, yeah, it fizzles out, because I have this non-DMG mechanic stuck in my brain about this being a critical failure, not just a miss.
Yeah.
And I mean, you play with me. I am a very, like, logical person when it comes to like, okay, you threw a fireball, you rolled a 1, you missed. It's got to go somewhere. And your aim probably doesn't mean that it's just going to like, I mean, I guess it could just like narratively just lob over and then fizzle out. But like Morgus in the Cyclops battle is a great example of this, where Daniel rolled a nat 1, and rather than having it hit a player or hit the Cyclops, because that goes against the rules, it just like shot into the ground, into the rubble that was the city of Wimston, and kind of like started this little fun new terrain smoldering fire, another just like problem for the party to solve. And like, so yes, long story short, I think I like there to be a little spiciness with my nat 1s, I guess is what I'm realizing.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm jotting it down a couple notes so I remember to talk about them.
Yeah.
Because there's a couple things that stem off of this that I want to talk about or touch on.
Yeah.
Sweet. So I guess the first one is I think that was really cool playing in it, having it affect the environment in a way, or adding an environmental hazard to a fight. Like just in general, in creating fights or like quote unquote boss fights, I love to throw environmental factors into it that make the party like interact in a way that they otherwise wouldn't. So there's not just like flat plain walk up punch thing.
Oh yeah, me too. The knolls in the trees, the fire. Yeah, love it.
Yeah. Those are all super cool. And to that effect, sometimes like it doesn't happen too often because it requires a very specific narrative situation to occur. But I'll have it where if my party nat 1s and fails an attack roll, instead of hitting on their miss, they will discover something that they otherwise hadn't found yet in the environment. So like the arrow will go wide, but it'll hit a wall. And when it hits the wall, it'll have this clear ringing noise, you know, indicating that the wall is hollow there, or there's something behind it.
Yeah.
Or like if I design an encounter that's really complicated and has like an environmental aspect that could be beneficial for the party, I'll have the miss make the character accidentally stumble into that thing. So they become aware of it when they otherwise weren't aware at the beginning. And in that way, I really like to treat nat 1s as the opposite end of like the spectrum of luck, where it's not a critical hit lucky, it's a miss, but it's still an amount of luck that has happened that will reveal something else in the world. And in that way, I try to take that negative like punishment of a natural 1 and add like a benefit on top of it that'll like, you know, in a math sense, cancel out the bad with a good. And that way, rolling a nat 1 is never a fear, and people don't have to feel like they need to fudge the roll or be super afraid of rolling a nat 1. Because sometimes it'll just miss, but sometimes it'll miss and be beneficial. Like halfling luck. But better.
Yeah, that's so good.
And then the second thing I wanted to point out, just because it came out with rolling a nat 1 and then hitting your ally instead, there are actually rules somewhere. I can't confirm or deny if they're in the DMG or if it was someone's custom rules about hitting cover when you're attacking. And there's like a small math formula for it, right? Because when something gives you partial cover, you get a +2 to AC, right? So say your monster has an AC of 14 and you have, you know, your PC is firing an arrow or a firebolt at that monster with an AC of 14 that has cover from your ally, or your ally is giving them cover because they're fighting in melee. So if you were to roll a 14, a 15, or a 16, you know, 3 hits that would tip, or a 14 or a 15, because a 16 would still hit because meets it beats it, right? Let me know if at any point I've lost you in the math talk.
I think I'm good still.
Okay. So if the PC rolls a 14 or a 15, they would normally hit the creature but they missed because of the cover.
Mm-hmm.
And in that way, their attack is instead hitting the ally that's giving them cover.
Yes.
Because it's hitting the 2 AC that is allowing cover to be hit.
Yeah. Yeah, I do it the other way. So...
Oh, okay.
I personally, and again, I hate math. This is just a testament to me as a DM coming out right here. I have never actively played with cover rules. Like, I understand. I mean, Margot, the person that I'm playing in our campaign together, is a rogue blood hunter multi-class, archer fighting style, constantly looking for that cover, right? I mentally know that I get a benefit of like standing behind a building or behind a tree. Like I know this about just like fighting in general and just from playing and being a DM. I don't have those numbers memorized. So like I don't know that like 3/4 cover is +2 to my AC or whatever. I'm never even actively thinking about that in game. Instead, as a DM, if I know that my players are trying to shoot or lodge something from a distance while their allies are in melee, then I will say, if you get a 5 or lower on this dice roll, then you're going to hit your friend. Rather than adding that buff to the AC of the monster. And I normally call it, I will almost always call it before, or try to, before y'all roll your dice, which can be hard to do over the internet.
Yeah. You're keeping track of a lot of things as a DM. To lose that one thing, very common.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest too, I don't 100% know the cover rules, but it's always on the DM screen that I look at. Yeah. So I'm always referencing that DM screen.
If anyone has a fix for DM screens when you play digitally, let me know, because I only have 2 fucking screens and they're all filled with shit. And so I don't really ever pull mine out because it's in the way if I like have it on my desk. And then I'm like, oh, you're going to an inn. I need this because I need to know what ale costs, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In your physical, like, do you have a physical DM screen that's covering that, or is it just the digital one?
I don't have a digital one. I just have this guy.
Oh, okay.
This one. And I
Mystic is holding up a physical DM
screen.
I'm
holding up a physical DM screen. But again, it's just right here at my desk, so if I ever need it during session, I'll just open the drawer and pull it out. But like, I'm not normally tracking. You're right, it's right here, cover. Yeah, I remember, this is a total like tangent. I looked at this after our session yesterday because it was like a full travel to this new city I was talking about. And I realized there's a travel pace thing on here. Don't use it. I just know how long it takes to get from one city to the other.
I mean, that's all you need. What I did at the start of my campaign is I drew my map on a grid paper, and I estimated how big the landmass was using Oregon, the state, as a reference for the landmass. It's a huge state. And then so based on like the scale and the squares, I figured out how many miles was in a square and how many days of travel they could travel by squares using that formula for the travel pace. It's more work than you have to do.
Yeah.
If you're a new DM, don't do that work.
Don't do it.
Just say it takes an amount of days. They'll understand. Be like, oh yeah, it'll take you 3 days. Boom, done.
Also, like, eyeball it. Like, this distance is the same as that distance. And yeah.
Mine ended up pretty easy. It was like, you could travel 3 squares in 1 day. Nice. Is what the math broke down to. If you're going at a normal pace. If you're going faster, you could do like 6 squares if you're going that like breakneck pace.
Yeah.
Or flying.
Cool.
Oh no. I just remembered I gave my party a flying carpet in the last campaign we played.
Oh no.
I completely forgot that they got that flying carpet, and now I remember. I gotta look at my notes.
Oh man. Well, are we ready? Are we ready for the blessed?
Yeah.
And the Banes.
Blessed, blessed, blessed pain.
Where should we start? With blesses or banes? Do we really play this too much differently from each other?
I think we do.
Crits and misses? Yeah.
I think we do, actually.
Okay.
I would say blesses for me are on the story side, which, you know, take that with a grain of salt because we both like to tell a good story.
Yeah.
I think that a bless is adding a little extra flavor outside of what the DMG says for both successes and crit fails, because it helps tell a good story. Yeah. It's really cool if the fireball goes into the rubble and heats it up. It's really cool if the arrow hits a wall that you now know is hollow, you know, like,
yeah,
it's sometimes teaches someone a lesson if their Eldritch Blast hits their teammate, you know?
Yeah, that'll teach you trying to help. Get out of that back line. Go take a hit. How dare you?
Sarcasm.
Yeah,
I think another bless to like going above and beyond what's in the DMG is like rewarding. You could like straight up reward your players. You could make a house rule that's like, oh, you got a Nat 20, you get a second attack, you know? Oh, there's something we didn't talk about that I wanted to talk about.
Well, let's talk about it. We have time.
I wanted to talk about the rulings for the dice rolled when you get a Nat 20. Because those rules have differed for me at different tables. So I actually roll it at my tables the same as the DMG. You just double your damage dice and you roll it, and you double your sneak attack dice and you roll it. I have played at tables where you automatically get the max of one of your attack dice, and you add that to the remainder that you've rolled, which is complicated because you have to do more math that I can't see and count on my fingers. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I'm sure there's other things that people do for Nat 20s, but those are the two that I've experienced.
Yeah. That Nat 20 rule where you take the maximum amount of damage you could do and then roll your crit dice on top is a carryover from 4th edition. The 4th edition critical hit rules was if you score a critical hit, your ability automatically does the most amount of damage possible. And that's the crit effect. You don't roll any extra dice unless you have some specific magic item that lets you roll more dice once you get a crit.
Damn.
Yeah, I found that looking up these rules today too. So I was wondering where that idea came from because it wasn't in any books, and it's a carryover from 4th edition.
Yes.
So all these D&D editions like bleeding into each other in the rules at tables. It's really cool.
It is cool.
But yeah, I've definitely played at that table too.
Yeah.
Where you use max damage and crits are. It's like super rewarding.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. Like, it's cool and it's a hella reward. Like, do the fucking damage, man. I would say another bless for going above the DMG is, I think it does, this is personal opinion, of course, as everything is. Don't add us. We haven't said that yet this episode.
Yeah, don't add us. It's our other catchphrase. It has to catch on for the merchandise.
Oh, yes. I think that knowing that there's potential to harm yourself, to harm others, to catch the building on fire, to like the chaos that is the real world, and bringing that to your table sort of enables and forces certain players to problem solve and work as a team in ways that, like, oh, you just didn't hit, wouldn't really have that effect on the table. I can just leave that there. You can think about it.
Okay.
A bane is that it's a free-for-all. You can do whatever the fuck you want. There's no regulations, and people coming from different tables might be upset about your custom rules, and you need to make sure you're very transparent about your rules in your session 0. Mm-hmm. And if you want to change them, you need to have a full-on conversation with your table and make sure they're cool with it, because it's a collaborative game, y'all.
Yep. Another potential bane is it could lead to situations of feeling extra helpless over your dice rolls when you're compounding a punishment on top of a punishment. It could just feel really bad for that player who just has a really unlucky day. And not only do they not hit anything, but they also wreck their entire party at the same time.
Mm-hmm. It could be discouraging. Yeah.
Another like potential bane, subjective to the party, is if the Nat 1 does force you to hit another party member, it could kind of escalate into an RP scenario that is really difficult to like navigate, because you of course didn't mean to hit them, but then if the player's role-playing and they're role-playing like you did intentionally hit them, it could lead to a conflict at the table that isn't what people want to do in their session.
Yep.
Which could always be clarified by talking above the table with your players and with the other people. Always talk above the table if you're in a situation that you don't feel comfortable with. PSA.
Safe words, safe tables. Yeah, do it. It's important. Yeah. What are your blesses, Adam? What are your blesses to using mechanics?
Like to using the book?
I mean, sure.
Like, because I kind of figured out that that's kind of what we went into, right? The blesses of using the custom rules around crits and hits, and the blesses along just using the book rules.
Yeah.
And the banes against both of them. I think the blesses for using the book rules are, it's really, like in 5th edition, it's really easy. Like it doesn't add any like complex situations to what happens. It's 20 hits and 1 misses, and you could just move along. It makes the dialogue go faster. It makes the combat go a little bit faster, and you don't run into that situation where your level 20 fighter throws his longsword across the battlefield. In some ways, it kind of fits to that built-in narrative of becoming more adept and not making mistakes on the battlefield that is outside of your character's control. It allows for situations where DMs don't feel like they have to improv on the spot of something bad that happens that might conflict with the player's idea of what their character is and isn't capable of doing when they mess up, which could create like a schism in there. I said these were blesses, but I feel like I've put them into banes, and I apologize for that because I'm in a headspace that I'm trying to escape. So I apologize if those came off as exceedingly negative.
No, it's
when they
good.
were supposed to be positive.
It's good. It's easy. If you're a new DM,
it's easy.
Use the rules as written. Get a handle on it first.
Yeah, just crit and miss. You're like, yeah, it misses.
It's less, of a downer for your players at the table.
Yeah. Do you think it's ironic that they call it magic missiles even though it can never miss?
Oh, no. Adam.
Yes! Got one in there.
Have you been sitting on that all day?
No. Just came to me. It hit me.
Oh,
like,
no.
Spellcasting. Oh, missing. Oh, great. I'm going to throw that in right at the end.
Oh my gosh. Well, we blessed, we baned, we talked successes and failures.
Yeah.
We talked about our week in D&D, and we've come to almost the hour mark.
Yep. Where we want to remind you that ultimately, it's up to you how you play D&D at your table. This is just what we do.
Yeah.
If you disagree,
don't
at
at us.
Just do it. Just play the game your way you want to play it.
Don't come at us, Nike.
Yeah. Nike?
Amazing. Well, if you are enjoying the podcast, we're on Instagram. We're on Twitter. Autumn Moon Studio, our umbrella company, is on TikTok. Make a Reddit. Start doing everything. Join us on Patreon. Pay us on coffee because we need new computers. That's all.
Yeah.
Because you know what? Both
is
good.
good.